There are phrases that seem innocent but carry poison behind them. Envy never presents itself openly. It hides, observes, measures, and speaks at the right moment. In the biblical world, this was already known. Envy had its own way of expressing itself, and the wise learned to detect these words before they turned into destruction. The Bible describes envious behavior from Genesis to the New Testament, and whenever envy appeared, it first manifested itself in speech. It wasn't the look that betrayed it, but the words, the tone, the phrase, the insinuation. Therefore, understanding how envy speaks is fundamental to protecting the heart. Today, many people continue to use this same pattern. Ambiguous words, twisted compliments, comments that sound concerned but hide discomfort with your progress. Nothing has changed. Only the scenarios have changed. The language of envy remains the same. In this video, you'll find out exactly which phrase this reveals that someone is speaking out of envy. Not out of care, not out of friendship, but out of insecurity and emotional competition. And to understand this, let's go back to the 1st century and see how the biblical people interpreted these signs. And if you want to learn how the Bible connects deeply with real life, follow the channel. Here we explain the Bible with historical depth applied to everyday life, in the most revealing and practical way possible. For the ancient Jews, envy was more than a feeling. It was a behavior, something that manifested itself in attitudes, glances, and especially in words. They believed that jealousy and rivalry could destroy an entire village if not detected early. This is because Middle Eastern society functioned on the basis of honor, respect, and community order. When someone felt envious, they tried to break this order using words that sowed discord, and like any seed, it started small. A phrase here, another there. The Bible clearly illustrates this in the ancient custom of recording disputes and suspicious behavior before the elders. When someone began to speak maliciously, even subtly, everyone noticed. They knew that speech reveals the heart before actions reveal intentions. That is why, in Proverbs, the wise warn so much about words. They said that the tongue could be a sharp sword, or a fire that sets a forest ablaze. And within this context, envy was identified not by what a person admitted to feeling, but by what they let slip. Today, we continue to see this. Envy doesn't arrive shouting, it arrives insinuating itself. And that is precisely the clue that biblical people learned to identify in order to avoid falling into emotional and spiritual traps. This is one of the most common phrases used by envious people. Funny, you've changed, haven't you? It's said as if it were a casual observation, but it carries 2 hidden intentions: to make you doubt yourself and to bring you down. The Bible has described this type of emotional strategy for millennia. In the ancient world, when someone began to prosper, it was common for comments like these to arise. They weren't direct confrontations. They were planted phrases designed to diminish someone's aura of success. The rabbis called this lashon hara, the language that stirs up malice without taking responsibility. In the time of Ezra, for example, when some Jews returned from exile and began to rebuild, other groups made malicious comments to spread insecurity. Do you really think you should rebuild this? The intention was not to help, it was to sabotage. This modern phrase carries the same spirit. The person isn't saying they're happy with your progress, they're implying that you've lost something, that you've become too proud, that you're too far behind to be celebrated. And as the ancient sages taught, when the phrase carries confusion, the heart carries envy. The change that bothers the other person is not your personality, it's your growth. Unlike the previous script, we're going to use a different story. Jeremiah. He was criticized many times by people who claimed to be concerned about him. They spoke as if they wanted what was best for him, but they were bothered by the impact of his message. At one point, religious leaders and influential people began saying things like, "Jeremiah, you're going too far." They weren't saying they envied his authority. They were implying he was overdoing it. It was an attempt to undermine his spiritual confidence. In that historical context, being a prophet meant having a voice, and having a voice meant influence, respect, and attention. When Jeremiah began to gain prominence, Envious people tried to use words to undermine his legitimacy. It was a subtle attack, not to destroy his mission but to undermine his confidence. Today, that same phrase comes up when someone who sees your growth tries to feign concern. I'm only saying this because I care. But the truth is the person is uncomfortable, not paying attention. Like Jeremiah, you need to discern when someone else's concern is genuine, and when it's just envy trying to hide behind a gentle tone. This phrase is a biblical and modern classic. It appears as a doubt, but it's actually an attack, and nothing has more power to paralyze someone than a seed of insecurity planted at the right moment. In the book of Nehemiah, when the people began to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, Sanballat and Tobiah tried to undermine the project. They said, "What are you doing? Even a fox could knock it down." It wasn't concern. It was pure envy of their progress. Back then, walls represented strength, autonomy, and rebirth. Seeing someone rising up again bothered those who remained stagnant. And the preferred tool of those who feel envy is doubt, disguised as prediction. Today, when someone says, "Are you really ready?" it's rarely out of concern. Usually, it's uncomfortable. It's an emotional threat disguised as a warning. The Bible shows that people who sow doubt don't want to protect your path. They want to disrupt its construction. This story is almost never discussed in relation to envy, but it is one of the most profound. Peninnah had children. Hannah did not. However, Peninnah constantly provoked Hannah with phrases that seemed like truths, but had cruel intent. Peninnah's envy wasn't about motherhood, it was about the spiritual grace bestowed upon Hannah. Peninnah had what was visible, but she lacked what was invisible: favor, purpose, depth. And her words showed this. Every year, Peninnah would say things that hurt Hannah. "Look how God has blessed me. And you?" This wasn't a celebration. It was an emotional competition. It was the kind of phrase that wounds slowly but deeply. In the ancient world, motherhood was a status symbol, but a relationship with God was a higher status symbol. Peninnah had the former, but not the latter. That's why her words were so sharp. And so it continues today. People who have more can feel envious of those who have depth, and they reveal this through hurtful phrases delivered with a smile on their face. This phrase was extremely common in the 1st century and appears in accounts of debates between leaders and teachers. It was used to create suspicion. It wasn't an accusation, it was an insinuation. And that's a hallmark of envy. When Peter and John began healing people, many leaders were scandalized and said, "This doesn't seem right to me." They had no argument. They were envious of the disciples' spiritual authority. In a cultural context, the phrase, "I just thought it was strange," was a technique of social defamation. It raised suspicion without raising responsibility. It was a trick disguised as an opinion. Today, that phrase appears exactly the same. "I just found it strange that you were growing up so fast. I just found your mannerisms strange." It's envy disguised as analysis. When a phrase makes you feel guilty for thriving, that's not observation. It's a veiled emotional attack. In the ancient world, the people of Israel believed that the mouth reveals what the heart tries to hide. Therefore, they trained their ears to discern intention, not just words. It was a spiritual and social skill. They observed patterns. If someone always raised doubts, always found things strange, always found fault, it was a sign of envy. They knew that the pattern reveals more than the isolated episode. Furthermore, they considered the context. When someone said something at the exact moment another person was prospering, that was considered sufficient evidence. Envious talk always appears close to someone else's advancement. They also analyze the tone, irony, sarcasm, exaggerated concern. All of that was understood as a mask. Envy always needs a mask. Today, we can learn from this wisdom. The tongue reveals what the heart tries to avoid, and the Bible shows that envy never stays hidden for long. When someone throws comments at you that undermine your confidence, it's a clear sign. Envy never wants you to move forward confidently. It prefers to see you hesitant, insecure, confused. Another sign, misguided praise. Wow, congratulations. For someone who didn't have much of a chance. That's not praise, it's a disguised attack. The Bible calls that deceptive flattery. Unexpected comparisons are also a sign. So-and-so does it better. That's not an opinion. It's a mirror held up to diminish you. Phrases that begin with just to help you out but leave you feeling worse than before are also scars. Envy doesn't help. Disguising it helps. And most importantly, when someone's words give you a weight that doesn't match their tone, it's envy. The Bible already warned, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The phrase someone uses can reveal much more than they imagine. Envy hides between the lines in the tone and the subtlety. The Bible exposes this clearly from ancient times. Today you learn to identify signs that the Hebrews already knew well: planted doubt, comparison, false concern, insinuation. All of these are emotional arrows that seem small but wound deeply. When you recognize these phrases, you protect your mind and your peace. And you begin to understand that not every comment that reaches you comes from a pure heart. Discerning is not judging, it's protecting yourself. If this content resonated with you, follow the channel. Here we explain the Bible with historical depth applied to real life, in a way that transforms understanding into wisdom. Click follow and continue this journey. The Bible is ancient, but its answers remain alive, and if you learn to listen to it, you will see life with a clarity that few possess.